In the meantime, President Trump has a warning, not to our enemies, but presumably even our friends like Japan. Take a look.
And we're going to treat countries fairly, but they have to treat us fairly. And if they're going to charge tax to our countries, if, as an example, we sell a car into Japan and they do things to us that make it impossible to sell cars in Japan, and yet they sell cars into us and they come in like by the hundreds of thousands on the biggest ships I've ever seen, we have to all talk about that. It's not fair. It's not fair.
All right, that just sort of crystallized sentiment that was in Donald Trump's inaugural address, and this was the first day for Asian markets to respond to that, and boy did they ever. None falling more precipitously than Japan's Nikkei, down over 1% today, more than a couple hundred points. To market watcher Gerri Kaltbaum, we've got economist and market watcher, very good read of history as well, Brian Wesbury, and last but not least, Gerri Willis. You know, Gerri, none of this should surprise us. These have been positions he's long had, and now he's implementing them, signing this executive order to revisit the Trans-Pacific Partnership, largely Asian deal, to which the Japanese were pegging so much of their fortune. And even we'll talk later today looking at NAFTA and revisiting that. What do you think?
Well, what's so interesting about this is he is doing it differently than other presidents. Other presidents promise a lot on the campaign trail and then never follow through. Trump is actually saying the same things in office he did out of office. And yes, this is going to be a big question for people, for example, on Wall Street, as it is for people in Asia about this trade. It's not something that's well regarded by Wall Street. They don't like the idea of not having these free trade pacts. But I have to tell you, here's how Trump describes them. He calls them fair trade, not free trade, fair trade. He says we don't get treated as we should in other markets, and he wants to put in place a big fine, a big penalty, a big tariff on American companies who go overseas, produce something, and then try to sell it back into our country. And let me tell you, there are lots and lots of people all over America who applaud that.
Indeed, but lots of Republicans, oddly enough, who do not. And so John McCain is the first out the chute to say, wait a minute. And we've already seen, Brian, the Teamsters herald this move. Yep. So what are we looking at here? This is like upside down world.
It is. We all know. I mean, I think if we really back away and look at the data, that Japan and China both erect barriers to trade. I mean, Japan will take our agricultural products when they get to the port and nitpick until they rot. And we know that these problems exist. China does have tariffs. They subsidize their industry. They steal our intellectual property. So that all goes on, and that should stop. I agree with the president 1,000% on that. One thing I don't know how you do, you can't tax one company. It's unconstitutional. It's illegal. You can't tax one person. You can't tax one company just because they move their plant. And Donald Trump should know, he's worked with foreign hotels. Sometimes it makes sense for a company to build a plant somewhere else because they do business all around the world. I think he also said today, and I think the most important part from my perspective, is that we're going to cut regulation and cut tax rates. By wooing companies to invest here or to stay here, we win, not by punishing them. And also we can win by getting China and Japan to play fair. I do agree with that.
You know, Gerri, he did kind of tip his hand a little bit here by saying, you're not going to want to leave here. This is in his remarks early in the Oval Office before the press were shooed out of the room. But when he was meeting with these business leaders, saying, you're not going to want to leave. So is he saying there, before any of you entertain the thought, and I'm going to cut down with 75% of the regulations you're dealing with, there's going to be a massive tax cut, you'll have very little reason to go. What did you think of that?
Look, all we've talked about for the last 8 years is Obama should be setting the conditions for business to thrive and he did the exact opposite. Regulation after regulation, hidden tax after hidden tax, and Trump is just rolling it all back. Nothing bad happens. He uses the word unleash, and that's exactly what you do. There's no way he's getting rid of 75% of regulations, but just going that way, just going that route will change the playing field. And as far as trade, the one thing I do like, as a good negotiator, he's starting high. He's starting with strength, and he will negotiate. He's starting from the position of strength. It'll probably come back and compromise, but to get a better trade deal from the, and Brian said it best, they're cheating over there. Everybody's cheating over there, and if we're going to take care of our own and do better here, this is how you got to go about it. You got to get tough.
All right, Gerri, we mentioned before that Canada's Prime Minister was not worried by this talk of potentially revisiting NAFTA, thinks that nothing there is going to harm Canada or the United States. I'm paraphrasing. Now Mexico's president speaking. We're monitoring his comments very, very closely, but he is scheduled to visit the president in the next couple of weeks. So I'm wondering how that's going to go, and how, when you meet with Mexico's president and then you meet with Canada's prime minister, I mean, how is all this going to go down?
Well, it's a very, very good question. We've never been here before, right? Unwinding trade deals is not something that typically happens. And we know that Mexico has not been happy with us for some time about the talk about the wall. We've been closer to Canada under the Obama administration. But look, here's what's so great about this. People are paying attention. People are paying attention to what the president says, and they're taking him seriously. They're coming to meet with him, and I believe it's a first step. I think these guys said it exactly right. It's a first step. This is an opening gambit. You know, the numbers, for example, that Trump puts out there, cutting corporate taxes by 15%. That was his original statement. Today he said 15 to 20%. This is all a negotiation. This is just the opening salvo over the bow.
All right, guys, thank you all very, very much.